Hello, and in today's video I'm going to show you how easy it is to fit these downlighters into a ceiling. Coming up next. So as you can see, currently the ceiling has a single light. What we're going to do is we're going to fit two of these bad boys. Let's get on with it. The first thing to do is to isolate the power. The best way to make sure that you've done that correctly is to turn the light on, check the light is on, then go and turn the power off and check it turns off. So this is not on the top floor, so I don't have access in the loft. The only access I have is through the ceiling. So the first thing I do is you want to measure out and put some marks on the ceiling where your holes are going to go for your lights. And then I use a bradawl or a thin screwdriver just to poke some holes around the circles that I've drawn on the ceiling where the lights are going to go, just to make sure I'm not crashing with any joists above, and in fact in this instance I was, and so I actually had to slightly move the hole. Once you're confident you're not crashing into any joists, you just get your hole cutter and cut the hole. It's not a bad idea to leave a couple of centimetres gap between your hole and a joist that you've discovered, just to give a bit of space for the mechanism that holds the light in place. In my case, the largest hole I could cut with my hole cutter was slightly smaller than the hole I needed, so I used a pad saw just to make the hole slightly bigger. And so the next job is to remove the original fitting. A reminder, the power is off. And what we're going to be doing here is running cables from here to the new lights. Now you can either daisy chain or you can run them in parallel off here. In this case, because the lights are in different directions, I'm doing one cable in one direction and one in the other. But if I had more, I could do one cable to one and then from that to the next one and that one to the next one. But when you connect them up, make sure they are parallel. So you are doing live to live, neutral to neutral, all the way down. So ultimately we're going to be hiding this connector block in the ceiling, but I just need to cut a hole big enough to actually get it through. So I'm using the pad saw just to cut a small rectangle out, and I'm actually going to be jamming another bit of plasterboard in there when we've finished, and then covering it with filler. So here's the fun bit. I have some coat hanger wire here, and what I'm doing, I'm poking it in the hole in the direction where I want the cable to go, making a note of where it stops, and then I'm going to hold that up against the ceiling and I'm going to make a mark where I think there's a joist. I then will use my bradawl and a screwdriver to make some holes around where I think the joist is. What I'm trying to do is find where the joist is and either side of the joist. So basically I'm doing a line of holes, and the first hole and the last hole should go all the way through and the other ones shouldn't, because they're where the joist is. Next thing to do is to use a chisel to actually cut a track in there, and you'll see what I'm going to do with that in a minute. As you can see, I've got another one here that I'm doing the same thing with, and again I've got the third one. Again, I'm just trying to find out where the joist is, and then I'm going to basically make a big hole either side and channel out the middle. And so now we're actually running the cable. Now in this instance this is quite straightforward, it's only about a foot away, so I can actually pull it through just using my hands. What you'll see is it's not quite so straightforward with some of the other ones. So I'm just going to put a little hook on the end of this, and I should be able to pull it through with another piece of wire. So the idea here is to make a hook on the end of the coat hanger wire and then use another piece of coat hanger wire also with a hook on the end, and what I should find is I can get the two to actually connect inside the ceiling. It sounds crazy, it actually works quite neatly, and as you can see here I've managed to pull it through. So I'm just going to connect the end of the cable to the end of this piece of wire now, and actually to stop it coming off I'm going to put it over a hook and just wind the wire back on itself. So it's not super clear to see here, but what I've done, I've stripped the cable and I've run the cables either side of the hook and then taped around it so that it's doesn't snag, and it also is sort of relatively well secured. Obviously make sure that you don't pull the cable all the way through, otherwise you'll have to thread it again. I actually cut these pieces of cable to length, which makes the job a little bit easier. And here's another example where I'm doing it on the other side.
And if you can't pull it through one way, put it through the other way, which is I think what we're going to try and do here. There we go. So one wire either side. Give it a squeeze.
And you can see this a little bit easier here. So I've put the wire back on itself and I'm going to tape over it. And again, that tape both stops the wire from coming away from the hook, but it also stops the wire from snagging as I'm pulling it through.
And then we should just be able to pull it through. There we go. Strip these back. And the good thing about these is that if you want to daisy chain, you've got the connections to do that.
So what I'm doing here is putting the cables into the fitting itself, and they don't need to be screwed in. They've got little pressure pads that you push to let the cables in, and then you release. L is live, N is neutral, live is brown, and neutral is blue.
You see that? And that one. We're not using the second one because we're not daisy chaining. And then you just fold these up. When I packed all the kit for this job, there we go. Up you go. Ooh. You're in.
Now I just connect those cables up to where the original light fitting was, connecting live and neutral to the live and neutral that were powering that fitting.
Sometimes it'll be quite confusing. You might actually have 3 different wires, or even 4 different 3-core wires going to your light fitting, and what you need to do there is just take note of what the light is actually being powered by, because what you'll have there is the lighting ring plus a switched live, and you may even have another light connected to that light. So take a photo so you know what you're dealing with, and then you should be okay. As I say, the actual fittings don't have earth, but it still doesn't do any harm to have the earth connected, because if you put a nail through the ceiling before you get to the light fitting, then it potentially could still trip, which is what you want.
So I'm using the connector block that was actually already there, but sometimes you might have a ceiling rose, and to make it a bit neater and fit it in the ceiling, you might replace that with a connector block. Again, just make a note of the other cables and how they are connected. I always say take a photo on your mobile.
If you're wiring to an older house, neutral is black and live is red, and a more modern house, neutral is blue, which is what the cables you're fitting will be, and live will be brown. So there we go, I'm putting both those neutrals in, and we'll do the same with the lives.
So it's good practice to cover the connector block with tape as well, because once the power's back on again, those screws will be live. So I'm just putting some on here before I pop it back in the ceiling.
There we go, so let's put the power on and see what happens. Okay, So the next job is to make it look neat. Poke these back in the ceiling.
If you've done your job right, there shouldn't be any chance of getting electrocuted, but it doesn't do any harm to use gloves just to do this job if the power is still on. And then I just use a bit of plasterboard just to push into that hole with an interference fit.
Okay, so the next stage is to make it look neat again. I tend to use this stuff, quick drying polyfiller. There's loads of different options out there. Probably should be using deep gap, but this works for me. So we just basically use our scraper and fill the holes.
Now you can take as little or as long as you like with this. I'm not taking too much care because I know that this is a student property and no one is going to be looking at the ceiling. Sometimes expandable foam can work when you're trying to fill holes as well before you put some filler on. Also, people do use easy fill from time to time. That also works quite well.
So there you have it. All you need to do now is let that dry. If you want, you can have another go with another coat, paint over it. But the beauty of downlighters is that you don't actually see the ceiling when they're on, because if you look up, you're blinded by it. So actually it doesn't need to look that pretty.
So I painted over the filling and this is what it looked like a couple of days later. As you can see, not perfect, but pretty good. Now, if you want it to look really nice, I would get the ceiling skimmed, and then of course you've got a perfectly flat ceiling, but in this case, I'm not too worried.
Hopefully you've enjoyed this video. If you have, give me a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more videos, subscribe, hit that notification bell, buy me a coffee if you want to help me out and help the channel out, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.